Well, hello and welcome live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you for tuning in. You're watching The Week Ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson. Of course, the program where we take a look at some of those top stories making headlines this week. And as always, what has kept South Africans talking? Well, let's take a look at what we can expect for today. All right, first up, President Cyril Ramaphosa is on a state visit to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The president is engaging with South African businesses operating in the kingdom before meeting His Excellency, His Royal Highness King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saudi. On that note, let's take you live there.
As Minister Patel was describing, as the interaction between various business players on both sides have been demonstrating. Trade between our two countries already totals $5 billion US, and we think we can increase it much further in the next few years. In fact, it is our dream and ambition that we should see this number scaling much higher. South Africa stands particularly ready to increase the overall export of a basket of goods with Saudi Arabia to bring together the balance to the trade account. The current flows of investment between our two countries are very promising indeed. One such company, and it's Aqua Power from Saudi Arabia, is active in the renewable energy space in our country, one of the catalytic sectors for South Africa. South Africa has what I would call unparalleled opportunities that await investors with the financial capability and great business appetite. Just as Saudi Arabia is positioned as the gateway to the Middle East and to the region, South Africa is the gateway to a dynamic continent with great prospects. Africa is growing its output quite rapidly and is urbanizing and has a young population. We already know that Saudi business sees itself as being part of Africa's success story. You have an opportunity here today to develop the relationships that can improve two-way capital flows between Saudi Arabia, this region broadly, in South Africa and Africa more broadly as well. Our country, South Africa, is a leading mining economy, and mining has been an integral part of our economic history for over centuries. And it's pleasing to hear that your future beyond 2030 also involves mining. Local and international companies are active across many different value chains, from iron ore to platinum, palladium, gold, diamonds, coal, chromium, and many other minerals. If it could be said that oil is the lifeblood of the Saudi economy, such is mining to South African economy as well. We have the mineral resources, but also the capability, the capacity, and above all, the solid experience. Saudi Arabia is interested in developing its own substantial mining resources, as we've heard, and we look forward to engagement between our two respective countries, where we can benefit each other on a mutual basis. We can offer expertise in mining services, in technologies, and in a range of equipment and components manufacturing that are used in the mining industry. There are many opportunities as well for joint venture partnerships. South Africa leads the way on the continent in terms of advanced manufacturing. We're the most industrialized country on the African continent. We also lead in science and technology that drives the export of our goods and services. Our firms can benefit from sharing ideas, they can benefit from sharing technologies and market knowledge in fields as diverse as green hydrogen, as has already been mentioned, petrochemicals, pharmaceutical products, and many others. South Africa is a favorable, reliable, and stable place to conduct business. We have a very sophisticated financial service sector, and we are Africa's deepest capital market, with a robust and strong rule of law as well as the protection of contracts and property rights. I want to call on Saudi business to be part of the renewed momentum of international investors that are now coming to South Africa. Through a targeted outreach to global and local businesses, we have so far attracted investment commitments to the value of approximately 70 billion US dollars, and this number is growing. We targeted $100 billion in a 5-year period, and we're going to far exceed that. Over the past 2 months, I have been at the launch of new investments across South Africa in a wide range of fields such as automotive, manufacturing, green economy, packaging, and many others. This positive investor sentiment in South Africa is in part owing to the process of ongoing regulatory and legislative reforms that we have embarked upon, that we are also driving to make our economy more competitive, to attract more investments, and to create more jobs so that we can address the various challenges that our country faces at present, which is poverty, inequality, and unemployment. These far-reaching reforms we have embarked on are taking place in sectors such as energy, transportation, telecommunications, water, rail, our ports, and across network industries. And we have here in our delegation ministers who are dedicated in driving these reforms in these various sectors. Next year, I will host the 5th South African Investment Conference that will take place in the first quarter of the year, and I want to use this opportunity to extend an invitation to the Saudi business community to join us, to be part of this massive drive of bringing investments to South Africa. And it's not just merely to bring investments, but to showcase various opportunities that the business community can be exposed to, sectors where they can make good money. Several of the world's leading multinational corporations do have a footprint in South Africa, and our own companies are active in a number of global markets. This is as suppliers of food, cars, chemicals, precious metals, and many others. By equal measure, Saudi companies have access to capital, to know-how, and to various markets around the world. There are many opportunities for joint ventures and industrial partnerships between businesses on both our country's side, so as to foster greater growth and investment. For example, we can do partnerships in agro-processing, in fertilizer production, in chemicals. We can supply a wider range of various products to Saudi markets as well. South Africa's services sectors and professional skills are highly regarded across the Middle East. Our engineers, our doctors, and teachers have already made a huge mark here. We also have filmmakers, entertainment entrepreneurs, bankers, insurance firms, tourism companies, information and communication technology businesses who are also very ready to come here. And as you say, tourism is another huge sector. And I should also say that it's embarrassing that we do not have a direct flight from South Africa to Saudi Arabia. And with both of us being embarrassed, I think it creates a great opportunity to ensure that we do ensure that we connect the two countries. We also have pilots from South Africa who often come here. So I hope you're not applauding to the embarrassment. But this creates a great opportunity. Out of failure and embarrassment sometimes arises great opportunities, and this embarrassment is creating this great opportunity for the two countries to be connected. So we are indeed a leading tourism destination, including for visitors from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. Our wildlife tourism is a particular drawcard for tourists from the region. Beyond the need to facilitate greater tourism between our two countries, there are many investment opportunities for Saudi businesses also in the tourism sector. Again, as I said, in wildlife tourism, such as things like game ranching and many others. And of course, linked to this whole process are the other reforms that will bolster and continue to bolster our tourism industry, and to ensure that as we grow our own tourism industry, we deepen and extend security to make sure that there's adequate security that can make our country even much more attractive. And last but not certainly the least, South Africa is blessed with vast tracts of arable land, one of the world's longest coastlines, and an average of 2,500 hours of sun every year. You have great abundance of sun, but so do we, even though in limited measures compared to yourself. Of course, the latter is no comparison to yours, but this abundant natural resource and the temperate climate is a firm basis for investment in agriculture as well as renewable energy. Given all that South Africa has to offer and all that Saudi Arabia has to offer the South African investor, the themes you have chosen are quite appropriate. Firstly, mining and industry, which includes, of course, health products, chemicals, steel, automobiles, as well as others. Secondly, agriculture and food processing, which, as we've come to know, is also very important not only for the peoples of the world, but also in this region. Thirdly, tourism, hospitality, which can include services as well, and indeed many services. Finally, energy and renewables. I look particularly forward to welcoming more of your renewable energy firms and technologies to enter our market. We hope to see you partnering with South African firms as we increase our renewable energy generation footprint and manufacture green energy components. And we are particularly pleased that Saudi Arabia is well steeped in the field of renewable energy and broad energy indeed. An area of potential synergies I want to particularly refer to is the green hydrogen economy. We have all been following with great interest the ambitious and spectacular NEOM project on the Red Sea coast. With plans to source 100% of NEOM's energy from renewable sources, including hydrogen-based power, Saudi investors will find substantial opportunities to leverage in South Africa in this regard. Similarly, there are opportunities for South African business to leverage at NEOM as well. We are the world's largest producer of platinum, a key input in hydrogen fuel cell technology. Our ambitious plans to unlock the potential of the green hydrogen economy include developing a hydrogen valley that stretches from the platinum belt in our country through the country's industrial heartland. A number of multinational investors like Anglo American Platinum have already begun leveraging these opportunities. Saudi investment across the value chain of the green hydrogen economy will not just support South Africa's economic goals, but those of Saudi Arabia as well in its ongoing drive towards sustainability. I've taken note of the reports received about your discussions this morning, and I've also heard as I came in how these discussions have been going. And I take great heart from the progress that has been made, particularly in the identification of the great opportunities between our two countries. I'm told that here in Jeddah, business does not stop at 6 p.m. on a Saturday night, so I have no doubt these discussions will continue, not just this afternoon, but well into the evening as well. Fueled, of course, by the legendary cups of fragrant Saudi coffee that I've been lucky to sample since I arrived. We also welcome the joint ventures noted in the reports received and about various agreements being concluded between private sector firms. The Business Council will need to maintain this great momentum that has been built, and so that it can solidify the economic relationship. When I was last here in 2018, we were essentially laying a foundation and digging the trenches. But during this visit, we are actually consolidating and solidifying that foundation, and this great building that we are constructing of economic development between our two countries is now going up. Saudi Arabia is a large consumer and capital market. It is also a country infused with foresight and great vision, and Vision 2030 being the roadmap for the kingdom's economic diversification. I welcome, therefore, the opportunity to work with all of you, and the work that you have already done, and the work that you have already done lays the basis for these opportunities, not only to be explored, but to explode. Later today, I'll be meeting the delegation led by His Royal Highness Crown Prince and a number of other business government officials. Our ministers and senior officials will be signing several agreements that will solidify and consolidate the economic and broader relationship that has evolved between our two countries since 1994, when the founding father of our democracy, Nelson Mandela, came here. There will also be agreements to facilitate new investment, which means that we are now beginning the process of consolidating what we spoke about in 2018. And I call on the two business communities to seriously seize the opportunity with both hands and to build on the solid relationship that exists between our two governments. Once more, I'd like to thank you for receiving me and giving me this opportunity, an opportunity that I've taken to really recognize and appreciate the progress that has been made in your deliberations, and I thank you all. Thank you very much.
Right, so there's a live visuals coming through in the back of President Cyril Ramaphosa, who has just addressed those in attendance. Again, President Cyril Ramaphosa on a state visit to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, engaging with South African businesses who are operating in the kingdom. Again, just before meeting His Excellency's Royal Highness King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saudi, speaking about, engaging with South African businesses, touching on various opportunities available, including in fields such as the green economy, motoring, manufacturing, as well as packaging, and just throwing forward to the 5th South African Investment Conference that is set to take place in the first quarter of next year. Again, we'll continue to monitor it as it unfolds, but we'll leave it there for now and take a quick ad break. There is more on the other side upon our return. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The Week in Review with myself, Liesl Wilson, continues. Let's take a look at stories that, in fact, made headlines this week.
This week in the politics wrap, the South African Transport and Allied Workers Union on Wednesday accused Transnet's top management of stalling wage negotiations after talks deadlocked. SATAL and the United National Transport Union members are striking, seeking a wage increase of up to 13%, while Transnet is offering between 4 and 5%.
We met with the employer at the bargaining council where they offered a revised offer of 4.5%. In fact, there's nothing revised in that offer. It's the same thing that we have been rejecting for the past few months. And there's no way that we are going to accept it now. The employer keeps on insulting us and our members. The employer knows very well that the current inflation rate in this country is 7.6%. The employer has been very greedy, they are selfish, and they are undermining the workers.
Suspended Public Prosecutor Bosisiwe Mkhwebane says she will appeal the Wednesday Western Cape High Court judgment that dismissed her urgent application to be allowed to go back to work immediately. Mkhwebane had approached the court asking for her immediate reinstatement soon after her suspension by President Cyril Ramaphosa was declared invalid by the High Court. However, that matter of her suspension has yet to be ruled on by the Constitutional Court. Action SA announced earlier this week that it would be laying criminal charges against some senior leaders of the DA, accusing the party of attempting to bribe an Action SA councillor. This follows last week's resignation of Zwelakhe Mngcwangu as the DA's chief whip in the KwaZulu-Natal legislature. Images have reportedly surfaced of Newcastle Ward Councillor Shadi Singh meeting with DA leaders such as John Steenhuisen, KZN Provincial Chairperson Dean McPherson, and Provincial Leader Francois Rogers. The DA has rubbished allegations that they attempted to switch Singh's allegiances to fill Mngcwangu's position.
All right, so on the back of that, other news making headlines. Former President Jacob Zuma's launched a constitutional court to bid to appeal the dismissal by the Pietermaritzburg High Court of his special plea in which he asked for his acquittal, as well as the removal of prosecutor in his corruption trial advocate Billy Downer. The Jacob G. Zuma Foundation has confirmed that the application has been filed. The Constitutional Court earlier turned down Zuma's application to appeal the dismissal of the reconsideration application by the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, Judge Mandisa Maya. But the Apex Court ruled that Zuma was, however, entitled to seek leave from the Constitutional Court to appeal the Pietermaritzburg High Court judgment. The latest court action comes on the eve of Zuma's arms deal corruption case, which is set to be back in the Pietermaritzburg High Court on Monday. Now, with Zuma's Constitutional Court bid now pending, the corruption trial is likely to see another postponement. Kun ruled that Zuma and his co-accused arms manufacturer Thales needn't be present in the court for that. Right, so for more on these and other political stories of the week, we are joined by Dr. Levi Ndau, political analyst. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Levi. Thank you for joining us again on the SABC.
Good afternoon to you, Liesl. Good afternoon to the viewers at home. Thank you for having me.
I want to touch on, some of the stories that obviously appeared in the package just earlier on to take the conversation forward. Transnet, being accused of stalling wage negotiations. And I just wonder if we look at what the impact of the strike has had for the economy, losing billions. But Transnet also coming out to say that they in fact cannot yield to the worker demands, citing unstable labor costs amongst other issues. Is this a fair response from their end? And could there be a protracted standoff with labor unions at this point?
Well, I think it's quite unfortunate that Transnet is finding itself in this difficult situation. One would have expected that the management of Transnet should have seen this coming and equally ensure that any form of a strike has to be prevented. One has a sense that it appears as if one of the parties, and in this case, one would think that it is the management, appears not to be coming up very strong and straight in terms of what they have on the table. When the workers talk about a particular percentage, the management would add a percentage or add a half, and that creates an impression that indeed they can be able to pay the workers. It is just that they do not want to do so. But also, one would have expected a situation where any form of a strike had to be prevented. If you look at the damage that this strike does to the economy, you would have expected the management of Transnet to act very quickly and swiftly in ensuring that they prevent any form of a strike, of this kind of a strike, if they also understand the negative impact that it has on our economy. We're coming from COVID-19. It appears as if we're going to be having a drought in South Africa. You need to be able to tighten all the screws in order to ensure that any form of disruption to the economy is actually prevented.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, port operations have now come to a halt, and it obviously now threatens to cripple key sectors, including agriculture and mining. And I wonder how you would weigh in on the severity of the strike, the impact on workers and consumers alike going forward.
It does a lot of impact on all these sectors that you've actually mentioned. Earlier on, I spoke about the impact of COVID-19 on our economy. And my expectation is that anybody who is given a responsibility to run any entity that is a part of growing the economy of South Africa has to ensure that any form of disruption, anything that will attract negativity to our economy has to be prevented. And I expected both the Transnet workers and management to have actually done better to prevent this from happening. It is possible for them to prevent this from happening if they are actually able to find one another. And it appears as if the two are constantly dripping apart, and that is actually not good for them and for South African economy in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're just looking at the possibilities that lie ahead. This says as we await, the outcomes of this process. But as we park that conversation for now, let's take a look at other stories that made headlines this week. The ANC proposing a motion of no confidence in Tanya Campbell. This follows 2 weeks, or comes after 2 weeks after voting out Johannesburg Mayor Mpopalatse. How would you weigh in on the political dynamics that are unfolding with regards to that?
I actually expected this to happen.
Yeah.
In the city of Ekurhuleni. Those that appear to have been in a coalition with the DA appears not to be happy with the manner in which these coalitions are being run. There are a number of stories that we have heard from the coalition partners with the DA about the arrogancy of the DA, about some of the demands that they've actually put forward, which are actually not being met. And this actually opens an opportunity for other parties who want to see these coalitions collapsing to take advantage of that. If they've succeeded in the removal of Vasco da Gama as the speaker and the removal of the mayor, of course they must take advantage of the weaknesses that they actually see in the coalitions. But equally, this should also be seen as a lesson to South Africans. In some parts of South Africa, coalitions are actually working very well. The challenge appears to be in the metros. And that sends a signal to all of us to say, what is it that we can do to ensure that these coalitions actually functions and work properly? And we have to avoid the kind of disruptions that we see all the time. Equally, it appears as if there is a clear program to a certain extent to abuse motions of no confidence in order to ensure that coalitions collapse. And my view is that, which is being shared by other people, unless we tighten screws in these coalition arrangements, we are always going to see these disruptions. The removal of leadership is going to continue because these arrangements that are made are not built on a very, very strong foundation.
Well, speaking about bringing, the issue of motions of no confidence to the fore and perhaps also coalitions and the efficacy at this point, it obviously has an impact on service delivery. And there have been some challenges in the metros themselves. Rand Water announcing as of 8 p.m. yesterday that there are going to be water cuts between 1 and 10 hours where there will be no water supply. And this is going to affect 3 metros in Gauteng. This is obviously, some of the ripple effects that we're seeing playing out. How do you weigh in on that going forward then?
Well, my observation is that, especially in the metros, there is sufficient time that is invested on the management of coalitions rather than on the actual mandate given to the metros. What the different councillors are preoccupied about in the metros, it's about positions that they occupy and having sleepless nights thinking about them being removed from their positions of responsibility. We have observed a number of councillors not attending council meetings where serious discussions are taking place. But when there is a matter that relates to a removal of a member or pushing for a motion of no confidence, the attendance is maximum. We have also observed that matters that relates to important aspects of the council, the passing of the budgets, issues relating to IDPs do not occupy a center stage. What occupies a center stage is the management and the functioning of a coalition. And of course, if energy is constantly diverted to the management of coalitions, obviously service delivery has to suffer, and the victims are the ordinary citizens who are the voters of the same councillors that are sitting in those offices.
Well, speaking of voting, just quickly as we wrap up this conversation, Dr. Levi, we're edging closer to elections. Just yesterday, there was the announcement by President Cyril Ramaphosa, the appointment of Mosotho Moepia as the chairperson of the IEC. And it really comes at a crucial time, given that it was in need of a figurehead leadership, but also tackling some of the more immediate tasks that lie ahead.
Well, one wasn't surprised with the appointment of Mosotho Moepia. He has been with that institution, the IEC, for quite some time. But obviously, with the elections coming in less than 18 months, he has a very, very huge responsibility ahead of him. Remember, Parliament still has to finalize the legislation that relates to the contestation of independent candidates. So Mufuthu Mwepa, for me, though he qualifies for the position, he has got a very huge responsibility on his shoulders to ensure that come 2024, they deliver as expected quality, free and fair elections for South Africans. All he needs is the support of government to ensure that whatever resources are required, he actually gets that. He must actually do proper planning and do what the IEC in South Africa is known for, to deliver best elections ever, as they always do.
Dr. Levi Ndau, we're going to have to leave the conversation there, but thank you very much for joining us here on the SABC, really just helping us explore and unpack some of the top stories that made headlines this week. Again, thank you to political analyst Dr. Levi Ndau for his time. We will take another ad break. There's more on the other side upon our return. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching The Week in Review. In other news now, the Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, John Jeffrey, today led a walk for freedom against human trafficking in Durban. The walk was organised by Abolishing All Injustices in the 21st Century in partnership with the department, as well as various other stakeholders. A21 is a non-profit organisation aiming to end slavery by reducing vulnerability, identifying victims and empowering survivors. Our reporter Jaylee Pulser has more.
Very important walk that took place this morning, a walk for the abolishment of human trafficking. It is modern day slavery, and we've seen these cases come to the fore. Several people started to speak out. A couple of years ago, we didn't know what human trafficking was, what it entailed, but it's so much deeper. And there's so many aspects of human trafficking. There's organ trafficking as well. But just to engage the Minister on this, I am joined by Deputy Minister of Justice, John Jeffrey. Thank you so much for speaking to the SABC News this morning. We saw the march taking place. Let's talk about the significance of this march and how far we've really come as a country, as South Africa, to stop and end this modern day slavery, human trafficking.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Jade. This march is part of an international program organized by A21, an international organization against human trafficking. So as government, Department of Justice, the police were here, the Metro Police, we were participating in that and supporting it. And it's a march that's taking place in a number of different locations in South Africa today and across the world. And it's designed to generate publicity, awareness in the campaign against human trafficking. How far we've come as a country, we've got a very comprehensive piece of legislation called the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act, which has been in operation since 2015. And the key issue is to ensure that that is implemented. That sets up the crime of human trafficking. Before the Act came into effect, trafficking for sexual purposes, trafficking of children was illegal. This extends it to a number of other kinds of trafficking, labor trafficking, for example. There's a national coordinating committee on anti-trafficking that government runs, and there's a number of policies and positions. So the key issue is the implementation of that act.
In terms of the cases that are being brought to police, why are we seeing that people are shying away from coming out and speaking about what is happening to them? Because there has been cases, but people are just not reporting it to the police. Yeah,
the trafficking is described as basically a shadows crime, a secret crime, crime that takes place in the shadows. And it's basically because people who are forced into trafficking are generally vulnerable people. They're doing it because of their circumstances, often economic, and so they're reluctant to report. So I do really want to emphasize that if there are any cases of trafficking, any victims of trafficking, they must please report to law enforcement, to the police. If they're concerned about their safety, there are things like witness protection. They can also contact contact the National Trafficking Hotline. I don't have the number on me, but please to report it. Maybe just also to say a bit about what is human trafficking. I mean, it comes in different forms. So it can be somebody who's been brought into the country to work selling sex. But it's not always that. It can be people, and I think in our continent, in Africa, it's mainly men who are trafficked, and mainly in the labor sector. So basically people desperate for work who then end up in a situation where they're forced to work, not given the option to leave. That's human trafficking. But human trafficking can also be debt bondage, which does happen with people selling sex. Somebody, a young woman, thinks that she's having got a boyfriend. It turns out that boyfriend is forcing her to have sex with other people, and then saying that she owes him money and she can't be released from this debt of giving sex to people until she's paid off that debt. So that's debt bondage. It can also be an issue of a family in a rural area in South Africa that's very poor. Somebody approaches them. It could be somebody else in the extended family to say, look, let your youngest daughter or one of your daughters come and work for us in the city. And the daughter goes off and works. She's not given any say in the matter. She doesn't even get the wages. The wages go back to the family in the rural area. So that's also human trafficking. It can be something like forced marriages, traditionally ukutwala, or the wrong practice of ukutwala, where an agreement is made between the groom, the guy looking for a wife, and the family of the girl, that she will marry him, and she's then forced into that marriage without actually having consented to it. That's also human trafficking.
I actually just wanted to touch on that ukutwala, but you've spoken in depth about it. Now, Deputy Minister, in terms of organ trafficking, not much is being spoken about that, but we do know that this is occurring in South Africa and across the African continent.
Look, we don't, as far as I know, we haven't had reported cases of organ trafficking. I know it happens in other parts of the world, South America, for example. It hasn't been that prevalent here. Obviously, the issue is there's a demand for human organs, for livers, kidneys, hearts, whatever, and people can get seized for that. It may well come here, so we've got to be on the lookout for it.
All right, thank you very much, our reporter Jade Lee-Polsa, for that update. As we move into other news now, the SABC board's 5-year term of office will end today. The SABC will officially be without a board from tomorrow. Well, this comes as the current parliamentary process to recommend a new board for the president's appointment has been delayed. 4 of the board members have served their full terms. The remaining 8 have only served 3.5 years in office after being appointed back in 2019 following the resignation of other members. 5 of the outgoing 12 non-executive board members have been renominated, shortlisted and interviewed to serve on the incoming board. The board has also been praised for stabilizing the cooperation, where it's also the first SABC board in 26 years to have retrenched hundreds of employees during a Section 189 process. Now, today, the outgoing board also bows out at a time where the wage dispute between the SABC and unions remains unresolved. As the weekend review continues, residents in Johannesburg, Tshwane and Ekurhuleni metros should brace themselves for continuing water shortages. Rand Water's announced that it has moved to the next phase of Stage 2 water load shedding due to growing demand. The bulk water supply company says water shedding will last between 1 and 10 hours. The water shedding started at 8 o'clock last night, and Rand Water says since the beginning of spring, the demand for water in municipalities per day has grown from 4,300 million litres per day to 4,900 million litres. Residents have been advised to use water sparingly. Meanwhile, the city of Tshwane has warned that some residents in the metro will be without water today due to planned maintenance. The metro says it will conduct maintenance as well as a network upgrade at Joan Road. This is between Renee Street and Willem Kreywagen Avenue. Meanwhile, residents at the Khabo Park in Moleji outside Polokwane in Limpopo say they are hopeful that the new water project that uses solar power will bring water relief to their area. More than 6 villages around Khabo Park have been without water for the past 4 years. They received 3 boreholes which use solar energy to pump water, and this project was handed over to the community by the Department of Water and Sanitation as well as a soft drinks company.
Residents at Khabo Park from Phase 1 to Phase 4 have been living without water since 2019. They say the water project will provide them and their livestock with water. The project, which uses solar energy, is set to provide over 300 households with water. Despite the intervention, some residents say the project does not provide them with adequate water. We have been struggling with water for over 4 to 5 years now. Even when we have these water tanks, we sometimes run out of water. They skip days to pump the water. And when we have funerals in the communities, we sometimes have to struggle. The private partner says they have been intervening to solve water problems in some communities.
Water is one of our critical sustainability issues. So we look at areas within South Africa. We use the report from the Department of Water and Sanitation that looks at hotspot areas, also areas where we also operate. And then we look at those areas and see what kind of solutions can we bring there to assist the people.
Meanwhile, Water and Sanitation departments say they are taking advantage of Limpopo's sunny weather to provide water to communities.
The water is fit for consumption, and we're also going green. Remember, there's load shedding. These boreholes must be energized. And you could see there are solar panels that are here. There's a solar system using the advantage of Limpopo that it has certain high levels of the availability of UV light.
This is one of the 3 water pumps set in this community to provide over 300 households with clean water. Despite these efforts, some of the community members say this is simply not enough. Paladi, SABC News, Muleji.
On a somber note now, actor Robbie Coltrane, who played Hagrid in the Harry Potter films, has died. He also appeared in the James Bond films Golden Eye and The World Is Not Enough. In a statement, his agent has confirmed that the actor died in hospital near Falkirk in Scotland. Tributes have continued to pour in, with many describing Coltrane as a unique talent and that his role as Hagrid brought joy to children and adults alike all over the world. Coltrane was awarded the BAFTA Scotland Award. This was back in 2011 for outstanding contribution to film.
Scottish actor Robbie Coltrane, best known for playing Hagrid in the Harry Potter films, has died. He was 72. His career spanned more than 4 decades, including roles in the James Bond films and starring in the 1990s British TV series Cracker as criminal psychologist Dr. Edward Fitzgerald. Born Anthony Robert Macmillan in Rutherglen, South Lanarkshire, the actor changed his name as an homage to celebrated jazz musician John Coltrane. He played a string of key television roles before winning international fame, but perhaps none as big or larger than life as Hagrid.
This morning, yes. No, it's this evening.
He spoke about the part in 2001 after the release of the first film.
It would have been sacrilegious. It would have been completely inappropriate to do anything other than the book. Really, yeah. Because children are very particular. They know exactly what they like, and they would notice if you did anything wrong. Joe Rollins, who wrote it, said I was the only man to play Hagrid.
J.K. Rowling led the tributes on Twitter, calling Coltrane an incredible talent, adding, quote, "I'll never know anyone remotely like Robbie again." Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon also sent her condolences, saying his role in the crime series Cracker was her favorite. Coltrane died in a Scottish hospital, according to reporting by Britain's PA media. He is survived by his sister, 2 children, and their mother.
Well, that's where we're going to leave it for you today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Of course, tomorrow we take a look at what we can expect on the week ahead. But for myself, Liesl Wilson and the team, until then, do take care. It's goodbye for now.